everyone. My name is Priya Kuber, and thank you all for coming this evening. And this panel is the good, the bad, the ugly use cases of blockchain. I was expecting an all-women panel.
So was I.
But I'm very excited to start with the man first. His name is Blake Richmond, and the way I'm going to introduce is not copy-paste from LinkedIn. Okay, this would be a fun round of bragging rights, where I just pass on the mic, starting with something fun about the person, and the person just brags, like, oh, at 13 I did X, Y, Z, or something cool till their company, whatever they want to introduce. So Blake Richmond plays competitive jiu-jitsu. And let me start with Blake.
I'm Blake. I am a Chief Investment Officer at NovaBlock Capital. It's a security...
Like a lollipop, but don't lick it.
What's that?
Hold it higher.
All right, I won't lick it. I run a security token ecosystem fund, so building the infrastructure that enables the capital markets of tomorrow.
Cool. All right, thank you. And next is Carrie Eldridge. She sold a painting in her decentralized marketplace, all in Bitcoin, for $1.25 million.
Oh, yeah. We have the world record for highest amount sale, total dollar amount of sale. Obviously, it's not worth that anymore, and starting to regret not selling that. I like to tell people we're Bitcoin rich and we're cash poor. Something about me, I'm just as happy debating advanced macroeconomics with people as I am playing Paganini concerto on my violin. I've played violin for 24 years.
Woohoo! And would you like to share something about your company? Like, when did you start?
Oh, right. So sorry. Sorry, I assume everybody knew who I am. Not that famous yet. We're getting there. So I quit. I've been starting companies since I was in college and artificial intelligence. I started my first artificial intelligence company when I was 19. And pitched it to Perkin Kleiner and and Andreessen Horowitz, and was reaching out already very ambitiously, and never letting any no really stop me, which is I guess why I kept going. But my current company is ATO Gallery. It is a tokenized value system where we're applying actual advanced quantitative methods, so real mathematical financial calculus, to understand everything about an artist, because the artwork is very subjective, the data around it is very objective. So I said, if the art markets, the auction houses, the galleries are going to commodify artists, why not let's actually commodify it in a way that empowers the artist and the collector that is collecting their work to create a real system of transparency, fluid liquidity of the tokens that we're selling for the artist, and also proof of provenance to completely circumvent and prevent a counterfeit market from ever really coming into existence, instead of backtracking on artwork from dead artists. Let's help the ones that are alive, maybe. That's just an idea.
Eating is always such a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you for that. And next is Monika Proffitt. Bragging rights, this is her 5th company. That's what I've been told. And she has written a book on Blockchain 101, Fundamentals of New Economy. So those of you all who are like new to blockchain, just take that book. I've been a fan of that book. And over to you.
Well, I wrote that book so that my cousins would finally know what I do. They love me. They're willing to listen to me yammer on and on over Thanksgiving when they're like, what is this blockchain thing? And I'm like, it's like Instagram without the delete feature for PDFs and money and transactions. They're like, I hate Instagram. I hate it even more now. So I'm trying to change hearts and minds, one metaphor at a time. But yes, it's my 5th company. I've been starting companies for over a decade. And I kind of fell into it. I learned that I was thoroughly unemployable around the same time that I also learned I was a good CEO, which was very fortuitous. If the two hadn't come together, we'd have a really different origin story right now. So yes, I'm the CEO and founder of Rise Housing. We're tokenizing real estate. It is one of the most simple and straightforward applications of blockchain that there is. I chose this vertical for a reason. It is the first foray into what I believe tokenization really is doing and blockchain's really doing, which is creating
true democracy in our internet of value in our economies. I'd like to see everybody voting, and I'd like to see everybody participating in our capitalist markets. So with tokenization, we can finally do that, and real estate is something that everybody knows because most everybody has a home. So.
Or watches HGTV.
Or watches HGTV in the homeless shelter.
Woohoo! And yay! And
I'm dying to know what you found.
So you Google Adryenn Ashley, the first thing comes film producer, but all my interactions, I've found her as a very efficient producer. Like, things deliver. And like high-tech priestess is the other word that I found commonly used across the internet. And 100 most influential women in blockchain. And yep, I'll let you talk about your company. Your
I was
background.
#1 for 6 weeks last summer. So,
Awesome.
so that was fun.
Bragging rights, yes.
Bragging rights. Okay, bragging rights. My favorite job ever in the history of my life, and I'm much older than I look, so there's quite a bit of choices here. Breaking into banks for a living, so I got to steal all your shit. It was great. There's no such thing as privacy. I learned that. So living a transparent and pretty much, fluid life, it works because there's no privacy. I was a cheerleader for 26 years. Could stand on somebody's hand, pull my foot back, touch the back of my head. That was fun. I am currently the CEO of Lolly, which is a naughty dating app for good girls that gets women laid, because 70% of women on the current dating apps that are available have been unwillingly celibate for more than a year. And I say unwillingly because not any penis will do. And we need safety, security, and certainty to say yes, because every time Netflix drops a new season of something, we're actually staying home instead of getting in the shower, shaving our legs, and going to dinner. So I'm going to solve that problem.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. And
You should be prepared by now. You've heard this like 5 times.
and every time it blows my mind.
It gets better in the After Dark version with alcohol and a comedy.
Totally.
Guaranteed.
And now introducing this weird person in gray dress and with flowers. I'm Priya Kuber, originally from India. Background in electronics and telecommunications. I started soldering since age 11, was opening up circuits and making hybrid devices, basically inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I was trying to build that. And learned to harvest a bunch of parts, and then fell into electronics and telecommunications in college, taught myself to code. Google Summer of Code, then funded my first company at 21. It was North India's first open source hardware company. I built an open source hardware company in India and sold it back to Arduino. They're the ones who invested. And then moved to Bay Area, set up Bay Area's first female-centric co-working space. Good business model, good press, but ran out of money because I did not realize the Silicon Valley way of blitzscaling, where you just raise a bunch of money, kill the competition, and then think about revenue model. Then ended up at Draper University, highly selective program, and some of my alums are here to support. Thank you. Right now I work in the decentralized web space. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of ERA, a company that's called the Era of New Economics. We are designing a non-zero-sum token. Glitz and glamour aside, basically we have reinvented the infrastructure required to build the new internet. That means decentralized applications, decentralized storage, and decentralized information retrieval. And bragging rights, one of my co-founders is the second Bitcoin developer after Satoshi Nakamoto, Marty Malmi, and I'm learning a lot working with this team. Anyway, good, the bad, the ugly use cases of blockchain, now that we've introduced. What does blockchain represent to you? Before I start any discussion, I try to see where the person's coming from. How would you define blockchain as a concept in your world?
Personal sovereignty.
That's why we have a man. And you realize you're the only guy up here. You're going to get a lot.
Oh, yes.
I thought that was brilliant.
I'm ready. Bring it.
I absolutely agree. It is personal sovereignty. Brittany really hit this home, but the ability to own all of your data, the ability to know that whether you're working with a company or for a company, that your data is yours and you actually own that. And though it sounds simple and you say, well, why don't we already have this? It's going to really change the world and how we interact with each other forever. Like, we have entered in a new phase of the internet and really a new phase of humanity and how we communicate and how we see property and what we think of as our property.
Yeah, I guess I look at it more through the lens of property and financial inclusion. I think that this is really the beginning of a whole new era of democracy and a very global scale and a very much way further than the reaches of government. So there's beyond personal sovereignty, there's almost like collective human sovereignty is finally going to be available.
An unfuckwithable ledger of what actually happened in a model that allows liquidity and easy exchange peer-to-peer without anyone being able to stop me from doing whatever the heck I want. It's kind of how I'm feeling right now.
Trying to keep it a little PG if we could, so we can post this.
Yeah, now that we know what it individually represents for each of ourselves, all of us have specialty in our own blockchain decentralized area. But again, this is a general discussion panel on the different use cases of blockchain. There is no one right answer. That's the thing about this panel. But multiple life experiences and thought processes coming together. This is going to be fun. So, healthcare on blockchain. Yes, better services. But what about the right to be forgotten? What is your opinion on healthcare and blockchain?
Healthcare.
You asked the right guy because he used to study and work in biotech, so.
Well, biotech is a little bit of a different beast than healthcare. I mean, the auditability and, I mean, if you want to get into healthcare and third-party payers and utilization rates and population management, yes, having a immutable ledger and being able to actually use channel analysis and look at that data to improve insurers' business models, that's one use case. When you talk about healthcare, my mind immediately jumps to biotech, where you have people developing drugs that might not see the light of day, they might not get out of phase 1, they are very expensive up front, it's a huge amount of risk up front for the company, and these things are very thinly funded. They're funded on milestones, they're funded on, have you completed a trial, have you had an interim data read, has that been successful, is that data good or is it gray? And you kill a patient, you wake up, your company's gone. So having a way to at least token, I mean, there was an example very recently, Genus Bio, they're raising $100 million for a royalty deal, which is an instrument that's previously available to only healthcare royalty partners and other massive financial institutions. This is now available to a global investor base. And that pressure release valve on that type of upfront capital and risk is so important for that type of issuer. But I can't speak to healthcare as a whole.
No, of course, like your personal opinion.
You know what you're saying about healthcare as a whole, though, I was thinking about just the tied up amount of resources and concern that exist in just, say, the families who are affected by pancreatic cancer, for example, right? There's a huge mortality rate with pancreatic cancer. We see families that are losing family members. There are very few treatment options, and the amount of money that those families specifically, even though they're maybe a global minority or even like a countrywide a minority, they would actually want to deploy their money into something that would solve something that they personally have been affected by. But we don't have mechanisms until tokenization to unlock that resource and that care. So I think about resources as being beyond just the money. The money follows what we love, what we care about, what we trust, what we want to see in the world. And when we can start seeing money flowing where we want the individual to have it flow, such as in being able to raise for specific types of research, that's where we're going to see a true internet of value, enabling our value system to drive our economics and our healthcare.
So, TMI, I have the motherfucker gene mutation. It's MTHFR. 30 to 40% of the country has it. And that means that we are significantly reactive to synthetic folic acid, which, i.e., is in every single thing that says enriched wheat flour. and pretty much everything else. And it really makes you intolerable to stress. It makes you crazy. It makes you think you need to go down to the doctor and get mental health drugs, which also, by the way, the FDA says you should never take because you have this gene mutation that can lead to a complete psychotic break. Are you doing the math? Because I'm getting all the way to school shooting here. So what would happen if we had data on the blockchain? What if our health records were on the blockchain? What if it were absolutely easy for everyone to say, I am opting into this for these particular research studies so that they can look at across millions of people instead of having to go here, 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 and only get certain people in these small sample sizes? What if we could look at all of these people's DNA, all of their medications, and actually start to put dots together and connect dots? Could we actually make society better more quickly? Yes, we totally could. But Big Pharma won't profit, so they'll never let us do it.
I just wanted to say something real quick about people always talk about the right to, and that was absolutely right, and I think that's a perfect use case. But people always talk about the right to be forgotten, and I think in terms of healthcare and transparency, I think of the right to be remembered, and the right to have for a hospital to have access to incredibly important data about a patient, because hospitals do not share databases. If you could type in a patient's name and see all of their records securely, completely securely, you could actually say, oh, alive. Case in point, my father was given penicillin in a hospital many years ago, and he's allergic since he was a baby, and he almost died. And he was already there for other problems. So, you know, and they didn't have access to that data, and he was unconscious and unable to tell them. So there are very, very obvious reasons why we should give global access to medical records. But, you know, it's never been able to be done before because people are always worried about data breaches and hacking and selling of data. But if you sovereign identity, if you have access and own that information and can count on it, like you can count on breathing if you're alive, then we solve this massive problem.
We have PDFs. We have PDF documents, portable document format, and a year and a half ago I started working with a video medicine company on a portable medical record format, because right now Epic is one of the top companies. They run all of the back-end systems for a lot of the medical companies. There already is like a standardized data set of where everything goes and what all of the fields are in the database. It would not be that difficult to turn that into a blockchain application that was portable, that could live with you, that could be attached to your driver's license. So if you are unconscious, they could put in their unlock code for their particular facility and unlock this data and see all of those records. It would not take long at all.
I agree.
So, good use case or bad use case?
Great use
Great
One
use
of the
case.
best,
Awesome.
I think, for humankind.
Yeah, audience, you could also just vote. Next, voting on blockchain. Talking of voting, tamper-proof records, yes. But what about the authenticity of voter registration? Can we trust the government to authentically feed the data in?
You mean the government that actually lets illegals register, that 24,000 were taken off the voter rolls in Pennsylvania after they said there were no illegal people on the voter rolls? You mean that government?
Yes, that voting on blockchain. What if, like, voting on blockchain, government's running on blockchain? Because that's one of the use cases that I keep hearing in many panels that are coming around. Yeah, I mean...
Transparent election?
Voter ID on blockchain, yes. Registering your actual votes, no, because we have the right to an anonymous voting system so that we cannot later on be taken out into the square and hung for our vote.
Zico starts.
And, yeah, how about Monika?
Oh no, I agree 100%. She's like mic dropped that one, so we're good.
Awesome. Carrie?
I mean, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm not a politician or a political science expert, but I mean, it does have utility in that it can provide transparency to ensure that people who are registered are actually entitled to. But beyond that, I don't really see any purpose. I mean, she just pointed it out. The whole reason why we have our system, why our forefathers set it up the way it is. You know, they never really expected the problems that we're having now back then.
But if we have it, the best use case, and you're probably going to get to this, is digital ID, sovereign ID, that we control, and that goes into this whole voter ID. They're like, no, we want a whole separate driver's license thingy that's not a driver's license, it's a voting license. And I'm like, okay, that's all well and good, but we have all of these disjointed things, and you want to... We have passports, for crying out loud!
Right.
Just show your freaking passport!
Right.
This is not difficult.
Yep. And Blake, what do you think? Voting on blockchain?
I mean, I can't speak to implementation, but I feel like implementing anything at that type of scale and with that type of underlying significance for a political system, it's absolutely important. But I can't speak to it. But as Adrian mentioned, I think we're sensing that we're hitting on a pretty important point here, and the theme seems to be digital identity and linking your health records, your eligibility for voting, whatever other social rights or societal or government implemented rights, and then in my world, investor rights and investor eligibility, and that just seems to be something that tying your identity to your specific, whether it's a blockchain address or in a new blockchain model, some sort of ID seems to be kind of the important underlying use case here.
But the problem with digital ID is that you then have to own your actions. How many of you here, I mean, we are the enlightened, believe in personal responsibility? How many of you believe in self-reliance?
10%.
How many of you are totally, absolutely fine with the idea of no-go backsies?
No-go backsies?
It's anti-victimhood. Blockchain, Bitcoin, everything. Your keys, your money. You lose your keys, you lost your money. Whoops. No, there's nobody to complain to, nobody to sue. You lost your keys. So as a society, we have not built in self-reliance. We've lost the ability to have my word is my bond and my handshake is a contract, and we need to move back to that before we can get to the point with this whole digital ID. But then the data problem is, oh my God, what happens when you have this sovereign digital ID that connects every single one of the dots and there's no longer privacy, which there really isn't already anyway, because I can literally tell you every single yoga mom who eats Haagen-Dazs after going to Bikram that lives in Massachusetts and drives a Toyota Camry. I can dial that down to like 10 people. So there's no privacy.
Well, how many of us are using Facebook knowing what we just talked about on the last panel, knowing all of the issues, but it's the most convenient way to log into absolutely everything on the internet?
No, because when Facebook says you've been naughty and you don't get to log in for 3 days, don't get to like or comment, then all of those Facebook logins no longer work anywhere else in the universe. Sovereign digital ID, I should be able to be me no matter what and not have a third-party company say, you're in a timeout.
Right, so you've obviously
I
gotten to that evolved point. What I'm saying is, we don't realize the significance of owning our data, and it doesn't become a question of whether or not we can until we do realize that.
So thumbs up or thumbs down team? Good use case, bad use case, voting on blockchain.
It's good and ugly. Can it be both?
It can
There
be
is
both.
such a thing as an ugly baby that you love it anyway.
Yes, yes.
You were right.
Yes. All right, talking about tokens. Token design. Are we buying tokens to spend or to hoard in hopes of increasing their value? Are we designing tokens right?
Which tokens?
Our crypto tokens, like pay-to-play, like EOS tokens, to Lolly tokens, to Bitcoins, to Ethereum, to are we buying to spend or are we buying to hoard? Because it like any money needs to flow. But if money is just projected as invest, hold, and become rich, then it messes up the economy. So that's why I would like your opinions on that.
So I think what's been happening in the news in the past year and a half, where we've had thousands of companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars for utility, quote unquote, utility tokens. And there's created a lot of confusion among people, whether they work in technology or not, about, well, what is a utility token? We've relied on our government and policymakers like the SEC to define what that is for us. But I just want everyone to know, from a very quintessential economic level, a question you should ask yourself if a token is utility or not. Here's the question. Does this token create friction on its own platform? As in, example, if I buy this token, is it going to provide me something that I can use in other places? Is it solving a problem that I already had, a pre-existing problem? Because what has happened with a lot of these utility tokens, these crypto coins, where they've created them that you have to go out and buy another token in order to buy this token. I have to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum in order to buy ABC or Dogecoin or whatever token. There's probably is a whatever token somewhere because there's a name for everything. And Jesus coin. I mean, really, it's a real coin.
Definitely a pre-existing problem.
Yes, it's a big problem, and I'm quite offended, as you know. So you need to ask yourself. You don't need some news or reporter or an engineer to tell you if something has utility or not. If the platform creates friction in itself by requiring you to buy something else and you cannot use it directly, or if it says it has a purpose, but it's not actually solving a problem you prior had in your life, or whether it's a digital problem or a physical problem in the real realm, then it's probably not a utility token. The second biggest thing that I've been noticing with these quote-unquote utility tokens is that a lot of them exist in order for them to make money. So if you buy these tokens, you were talking about, do you buy them, are they hoarding them, expecting for a value to go up because the scarcity is in play? That doesn't actually create value. I think people get that confused. Money, actual fiat, has value because it is pegged to assets. It's pegged to entire national productions. It's pegged to actual economies of scale. Whereas a token that you just create is not. And if a token that someone is creating is only so that they can make money, then it's not really a utility token. You don't own that token. You don't own any equity in that company. And if that company disappears tomorrow, you get nothing. Whereas if you buy a stock, which a lot of these, fraud utility tokens like to commend themselves to, it's like owning a company. It's not. If you own Amazon stock and the Amazon bankrupts for whatever reason, and you have preferred stock or common stock, you're going to get paid out because the company has IP, it has actual assets, it has money in a bank. You don't get paid out with a utility token. My company, not to take too much time, but my company is an tokenized value system, but it's based on actual artwork that you can put on a wall. And if for any reason something happens to the artist or to the platform, the artist is in a smart contract, is in an actual contract where we control assets that our users are paid out. It has actual utility and it has actual value. So ask yourself that before you invest in anything that's a quote-unquote utility token. Do you need this? Do you get paid if something happens?
I'd actually like to just bring up the... I've thought about utility tokens and like how we've already had pre-existing models that just weren't tokenized on the blockchain, but they're still being used. So when I had to explain a utility token within an ecosystem to somebody, I was like, what's the best metaphor? I mean, wouldn't cash back on your Visa card work as a utility token? It's just not been tokenized, but we've been doing it all along. 2% cash back, go use it here, go use it there. Those strategic partnerships make it so you can get miles, you can get this and that. These incentives, they exist. It's been tokenized. We've been dealing with tokenized things for a while. Utility tokens have actually had a great place in our ecosystem to incentivize usership in certain things like our Visa cards. So I think that when we look at this, it's almost more helpful to look at it through a metaphor in a way. Like look for where you've already seen this, because if it quacks like a duck, it's just a tokenized duck. It's just the same thing. So you've seen it before, and perhaps you just haven't been looking in the places where you were already using economic incentives in your personal budgeting life even, and it just wasn't on the blockchain. But like take the glitz and glamour away from it. Take the like third-party exchange, all this stuff, and it's like we've been using utility tokens for a long time. And they've been great in some, exactly.
You don't own the trains in New York. But the Metro card gives you utility and that you can access it, you can use it, you have actual utility, but you don't own the trains, you don't own the subway itself.
So when we're talking about tokens, we're talking about fiat money. I look at it this way. You're saying, do you hold it, do you spend it? Okay, if I find a 1906 silver dollar, I'm putting that baby in my top drawer, maybe even in the safe, depending on how much it's worth, and I'm hodling that baby. But if I find a 2016 quarter, I'm putting it in the gum machine and using it. So there are all different kinds of cryptocurrencies. There are all different kinds of tokens, and it really depends on what they're used for and how they're programmed and how the smart contracts are programmed. You know, I mean, I designed my token to be unpumpable to the point where even my very favorite billionaire investors were like, there's not enough ROI in that because it's like a subway token. I'm like, yeah, on purpose, because I don't want to go to jail. I don't look good in orange.
Wow, okay. And Blake, what do you think of?
I agree with Adrian.
You don't agree orange either?
No, I don't. I don't. No, to agree with you. I mean, there's such nuance between each one's. Even the transactional ones are still being determined. Is it transactional? Is it a store of value? But utility token, to me, like the utility in that is circumventing regulation and selling unregistered securities. It's a fundraising mechanism. I mean, there's no reason that you need a token to buy a service. I mean, it's basically Smurfberries on an iPad game.
Whoa! I spend $20 a day on the Wizard of Oz to buy boosts and upgrades so that I can get to the next level. I would totally do that on a token if I could. If I would, it's the exact same thing. I'm already doing it.
Exactly, but you can be doing that with fiat.
But what if I want to do it with a token because then it's more trackable?
That's the Chuck E. Cheese power card then.
Yes! Exactly!
And you bring up a great point. JP Morgan with the JPM coin, that's not about moving money around quickly. That's data collection. That's about, one, scraping data and then feeding it to machine learning algorithms and then being able to leverage that AI to deploy their services more efficiently. They went from a rent-seeking model to a data-driven model, and their margins, although their revenue may drop, everybody's revenue in the banking service industry is dropping, and margins are dropping faster. They just took their margins from this to this with a data-driven play than a rent-seeking play.
Which is perfect.
That's a good utility token.
So we're almost at the end of the time. Like being the rule-breaking, controversial person that I have been, I'd like you all to just comment on this one statement. There are no provisions in blockchain that technically prohibit a dishonest group from controlling the majority of the blockchain. It's a little technical, I'll repeat again. There's a sentence that said, there are no provisions in the blockchain that technically prohibit a dishonest group from controlling the majority of the blockchain.
I agree with that, but you're talking about the fact that there are multiple blockchains, but it's not about blockchain, it's about the applications that people actually use. So with my company, and I publicly say I want others to copy me, and I want others, I'm giving away parts of our IP for free once we launch, because I want people to understand that you can self-govern. So I worked at Morgan Stanley for years. I still have my Series 7 and 66 licenses. I'm actually an independent advisor for UBS Bank. And from a banking background, I like regulation, and that's controversial to a lot of crypto people. But we designed our ecosystem so that we're self-regulating, so that there are layers, so that in order to get to a free market with art, people have described us as like an investment bank meets a Kickstarter. We raise money for an artist up front, and in order to do that, not only are we saying, okay, we're going to sell, X amount of tokens and raise $5 million for an artist and give them all the money to the artist. I thought about, hey, what happens if this artist has 2 or 3 billionaire friends and they buy all of the tokens and create manipulation? Because if the users are private and hidden, then what are the other people going to see and what are they going to perceive? So we've put rules and regulations in place to not only reach a certain amount of money, but a certain amount of users, and to regulate, not to go into the detail, but the governing method within, we make sure that we can get to a certain amount of people to prevent manipulation. There has to be regulation in, and it doesn't just have to be a free-for-all. You can design it from the beginning.
So the way it is designed, paying attention to the way the blockchain is implemented is important.
Yes.
And that's something I'd like to leave the viewers with. Would love, if you have exactly one sentence to round this up, I just pass on the mic and then call it a wrap.
Ladies first.
Oh, okay. Chicken. Honestly, I just hope people can remember the most important facets to understanding what is a utility, what has utility as a good example, and what is bad, so that people don't get taken advantage of.
Thank you so much, everybody. We have to break.
Yes.
But this is clearly amazing. Let's take it to Twitter.